Um,
Welcome everybody to Wildlife 101. It's our webinar series here with Ranger Jen. You're going to hear more about our lovely guest and presenter today, but to not let Linda steal the spotlight, frogs are our main focus tonight, and I'm really glad that you're here to learn more about your Georgia frogs. And I'd be curious if in alphabetical order, anyone can name all 32 that are on the list without cheating. So if
in
you can name
alphabetical
all
order?
32, alphabetical order.
Oh boy.
If you
Not
could
sure I
name
could do that.
in the chat, you get an award, and that award is street cred in my world.
Somebody says hard pass.
Yeah, thanks, Tasha.
That's hilarious. Let's give it a few more minutes. Or at least another one or two here.
I'm challenging someone in here tonight. They can name all of them. Am I wrong? Is it 32?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those 32 that have an established population, there's always the chance for the rogue, strange frog that's not supposed to be here to be here. We'll actually talk about one of those.
Okay, I like that. Oh yeah, Ranger Shondon from DeKalb County. He loves amphibians, and I've been on one of his amphibian hikes. He's over at Arabia Mountain. So if you can get on one of Ranger Shondon's hikes over there, I could stare at these little ephemerals for days on his hikes. Things that we walk past every day. But yeah, so folks, if you're just joining us, it's Wildlife 101, and this month we are excited to talk with Linda May from the Georgia DNR, and she's going to share a lot more with us about frogs, specifically Georgia frogs. But first, I'm going to tee this up with a few things from the city of Milton. So my name is Jen Young, affectionately known as Ranger Jen. I work for the city of Milton, and it's my job to engage the public in their passive public spaces, get people excited about nature, and to teach you a few tips about the wildlife that you find in your backyard. So as we know, my own kid would affectionately say, hey, if it's in our house, it's our rules. But when we're in their house, it's their rules. And so we're going to learn how to, coexist with those in the wildlife. So a little bit about Milton. I teach a Learn to Fish program. I'm super engaged in teaching kids about pond ecology, the Georgia fish that you're going to find in just your standard backyard pond as well, and make fishing fun. And we're going to keep this a lifetime sport. We're also going to teach you a little bit about being in the backwoods, whether it's a backpacking class or cooking in the backwoods. And then, of course, our Junior Ranger program for anyone, basically grades 1st to 8th. We'd love to see you involved in our Ranger programs. And then we're here with Wildlife 101, which is where you all are. Next month, I want you to tune in because Milton has an annual bear sighting, and we're so grateful for Appalachia, Georgia American Black Bear Group, and they are going to teach us about the black bears, their habitat, how to not really coexist in Milton, but if you do have a bear sighting, what to do, how to prepare your property. And if you do find yourself in North Georgia, which if you're lucky enough to have a cabin where it's quiet and you don't have cell service, I bet you encounter a lot of black bears. So you can find all of that information, great question in the chat. You can find all of that information on our webpage. You'll get a link to that after this webinar is over, you'll get the link to this webinar so you can share it, you can review it, you can take notes, and then also you can register for any of our classes. So today for this webinar, Linda, I think she loves a little bit of engagement. So don't be shy to write in the chat. She wants to hear from you. She wants to know how you want to engage with frogs. Like, what are you listening to in your backyard? So as the sun's setting and you open your window, do you have sounds coming through? And maybe you can identify them tonight and let us know. Also, you can write in the Q&A box. So it's a more formal way. There's a Q&A box at the bottom or the top, depending on where you put it on your screen. And then there's also a chat box. So if you put a formal question in the Q&A, we'll make sure Linda gets a chance to answer that either throughout the presentation or at the end. If you write in the chat box, I'll be monitoring that myself. And my hope is we hear lots of cool feedback from you guys. At the end of this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to fill out a survey. It's a great way to tell Ranger Jen, what do you want to hear more about? What kind of webinars do you want to see? I know that we are queued up to have black bears next, and then we're going to learn a little bit more about fungi, specifically in the Piedmont region. And then we're going to have Linda May back. Guess what? In November, folks, because we're going to learn about owls. And a little fun fact about Ranger Jen, it is my favorite thing in the world, plant or animal. I will track them, I will follow them, I want to bring them to my own property. When Linda and I were preparing for this presentation, she shared with me that she has an owl box and they're there. So congratulations, Linda. I'll take any of your tips that you have in November. But I'll let Linda tell you a little bit more about her, work in wildlife and educating the community. But what I will say is she has years of experience. I have watched her YouTube videos for the last several years, tracking and following, and it's been a huge inspiration for me as a female in this field, to be inspired by somebody who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty, has a wonderful personality to engage with young and old. So I know you're just going to absolutely love this presentation. So I'm going to turn this over to Linda.
Thank you, Jen. I'm excited to be here. And I do have a pretty cool job. My title is Outreach Coordinator for Georgia Department of Natural Resources Wildlife Conservation Section. And so I'm mostly focused on non-game species, so things that are not hunted or fished for. And even though some people, I guess, eat frog legs, they're technically considered non-game. And I do have some quirkiness about me, and that's why I have the perfect job, because there's a lot of quirky in what I do, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share some of these fun things with you all. Does anyone know what this picture is behind me? You can put in the chat if you have some ideas. And this is in my dining room, by the way. It's not your standard dining room wall decor, but it is for me. Anyone know what it might be? If you can see it well enough, hopefully you can. It's some little dot looking things with some bubbles around each one. Okay, I'll tell you. Those are upland chorus frog eggs. And I have all kind of nature pictures in my dining room here, and I thought this one would be a perfect backdrop. Oh, you did say frog eggs, Tasha. Very good. You were correct. So I'm going to share my screen now. It actually just started pouring rain here. I don't know if it's raining there. We've had so much rain lately that this program is perfect. So, because the frogs are going to be out and about when it's raining more. All right, so we're just going to go over some basic frog natural history, give you kind of an overview of frogs in Georgia. Mostly we're going to focus on the ones around Metro Atlanta. So if you're tuning in from another part of the state, just know there's other species that could be there. And some of these may be there as well. Some of these have statewide ranges. But and then we'll get into what they actually look like, and sound like. So we have a pretty good variety of frogs, 32 species, and they're in kind of different groups. We have what we call the true frogs in the top right there. I'm sorry, top left there. And those are the ones that are highly aquatic and they have the webbed feet. And then we have the tree frogs, that green tree frog you see in the middle with the little suction cup discs on the ends of their toes. And that helps them to stay attached to trees, or sometimes your plastic garbage can outside. I used to get spooked all the time by a green tree frog when I would change out the liner at a nature center I worked at, outside garbage can, or even your windows. And so they're really fun. Cricket frogs, as their name implies, are really small, and they actually do sound kind of like crickets. And I mean, they're about the size of your thumbnail, maybe a hair bigger. And then we have what we consider true toads in the bottom left, and they just have wartier skin. But, you know, a lot of people want to know what the difference is between a toad and a frog. So question for you, is a toad a frog, or are they different? If you want to try and type in the chat there. Let's see if anyone's okay. Different? No. Is it toad or frog? So they are different, but as far as the group of animals is concerned, a toad is just a type of frog. So yes, you guys got it. And it's just that it has a little bit wartier skin, which means it doesn't have to be as closely tied, you know, to water. It doesn't have to be close to water, in the water all the time, like say a true frog would have to be. So they don't lose that moisture out of their skin quite as quickly. And then there's a couple other really strange looking frogs in that the bottom two pictures in the middle there. The narrow-mouthed toad, it's kind of in a group all on its own, and you can see it looks a little different. And then the spadefoot toad, very cryptic looking toad, which we'll get into both of those a little more. So, and then we have a couple non-native frogs that have established populations here. We have let's see, hang on, let me move this. We have the greenhouse frog. It's really small. And then we have the Cuban tree frog, which actually gets really big. And we believe both of these came in probably in tropical plant shipments from Cuba, Bahamas, that general area. The Cuban tree frog wasn't here for a while. It was, you know, these were in Florida. Like Florida is known for having all kinds of strange exotic pets that have been released, and non-native species there. Well, they are starting to kind of creep their way into our state too. So the Cuban tree frog is probably more problematic because they both compete with food, our native frogs, for food, but the Cuban tree frog can actually eat the other frogs. It can get large. It can get like the size of your hand. So I don't think we have them this far north yet, hopefully, but they are along the coast at this point. All right, so bringing it back to home, Milton and North Fulton County there, we have about 16 to 18 different species. So not all 32 frogs live in the whole state there. As you go further south, you can see the colors get darker. That means there's more different species down there. So frogs, as you probably are not surprised, they like warmth and they like humidity. And we have plenty of that up here. But of course, as you go further south towards Florida, that increases. So you're going to get more variety of frogs. So where do frogs live? These are some of the typical habitats, you know, lakes, streams, ponds. This picture in the middle is actually just a grassy area that has had a torrential downpour, and it was filled with squirrel tree frogs. So some frogs, they just need a puddle, and you know, you just get a really heavy rainstorm and you get some water puddling up there, then you will attract frogs. And some frogs instinctively, I'm not sure how, but they know if a body of water has fish in it or not. So some frogs, tadpoles, are really readily eaten by fish, so they will not really go to, say, a lake here. This is a picture of Lake Lanier in the top left. They won't really lay their eggs in there. but they will in this little pool in the middle of a grassy area. So the squirrel tree frog is one that whose tadpoles and eggs are readily eaten, whereas something like a bullfrog that has a little more robust tadpole, it's maybe a little noxious even to fish, then they will be more readily breeding in around a lake. So this picture on the left there, that is a pineapple plant that my secretary years ago had out on the patio at our headquarters office, DNR headquarters and social circle. And these cute little frogs would just hang out in there. So, and I show that just so you know, you don't have to go somewhere far and, you know, into the wilderness to find frogs. You probably have them all around your house. You can see them when you go out shopping, especially after a heavy rain. And, you know, you're walking along the sidewalk and there's the street lights, and you're going to see toads hopping around. So they are part of our everyday lives. We just have to take a moment to notice them. We do have one rare frog in the state. That's the gopher frog. And this is going to be in South Georgia. I don't know if you, let me go back to this map. See where there's kind of a line where it goes from like the 16 to 18 number of frogs, and then starts getting into the 19 to 21, and then even more. It's that's the fall line. That's the line between like Columbus and Macon and Augusta. And they call it the fall line because the elevation changes. That's actually Georgia's ancient coastline. And so there's a lot of cool critters that live south of that. And one of them is the gopher tortoise. They dig these burrows, these kind of, you know, holes in the ground that you can see in this picture about the size of a gopher tortoise. And those burrows can be up to 10 feet deep and 40 feet long, and they support about 360 different other species that use them for shelter and to thermoregulate. And so they can't live above that fall line because the soil here in the Piedmont is too hard. We know our soil around Metro Atlanta is like hard clay, right? And so their range is only restricted to the fall line and south. And then so there's a rare frog associated with the somewhat rare gopher tortoise that lives in those gopher tortoise burrows. So that's kind of neat. It's not listed as threatened or endangered, and we hope to keep it that way. So there's different captive breeding programs done and habitat restoration to try and keep them from blipping off the planet. We want to keep all our creatures here. All right, let's see. Okay, so in addition to just being cool creatures, I mean, like that's enough, right? Frogs are important, what we call bioindicators. So a bioindicator just means that it's a living creature that can tell us a little bit more than maybe what we see with our own eyes on what's going on in the environment. And that is because frogs are very sensitive to any kind of toxins, pollutions in the water, in the air, and they live on both land and water, and they breathe through their skin. So if there's anything going on out there that's detrimental, they're going to be one of the first to pick up on it. So if you ever come across a strange looking frog like this, there's definitely something going on there, right? Hopefully you've never seen this before. So if you have a nice variety of frogs around you and they all look normal, then you probably have a healthy environment. So that, can indicate a healthy environment if your frogs are doing well. Other reasons, like ecosystem services or ecological reasons why frogs are important, they do serve as food for other creatures, including this great blue heron here. That's a bad day for that frog, isn't it? Poor guy. And if you've ever had frog legs, they say it tastes like chicken. I did have them once. When I was a kid, my parents brought us to a fancy restaurant just trying to do something different. It's like totally out of the norm. If we ever went out to eat, it was normally McDonald's. But we went to this fancy restaurant and they had a bunch of weird stuff on the menu. And the most normal thing was frog legs. And so that's what I had. And there's not much to them, right? Even a large frog like a bullfrog, there's still not much meat to that. But it does kind of taste like dark meat chicken. So it's not anything to get super excited about. But, you know, in a survival situation, I guess that would be just fine. Let's see. All right, and then if you like to garden and you don't like your plants to get ravaged by garden pests, then you want frogs around because they will eat those insects and slugs and beetles and things that are hurting your plants. And I had to throw this cheesy little meme in here, like, why are frogs so happy? They eat whatever bugs them. Boom, boom. I know that was bad, but it was fun, right? So they can serve not only as prey in the food chain or food web, but they are also predators and very helpful ones at that. So we've learned a little bit about, you know, how we have a variety of frogs here, how their presence or absence can indicate what's going on, you know, as far as the environmental health. And but beyond that, I just think they're fun to come across. You know, they're just neat, very interesting creatures. And so if for no other reason, you're not thinking about all those biological reasons why we love having frogs around, those ecosystem services, just that they are a fun part of life is good enough. So we're going to get into a little more about that. This frog here has got this big bubble on its chin that's called a vocal sac. This is an ornate chorus frog. They don't live in Metro Atlanta. They're a South Georgia frog. So we're not going to be covering the South Georgia frogs so much. But that vocal sac is what helps them really bellow out and reverberate the sound that they make. So we are going to get into the sounds. I hope you have your audio turned up. But before we do, why do frogs call in the first place? What's the point of that? You can type something in the chat if you'd like. Yes, to mate, to find a mate. And it's pretty much the males that are doing the calling as far as their typical sound that they make. There are, you know, other little sounds that frogs make, like a release call, like, you know, somebody or something grabbed them and they want to let go and they're like, beep. Or if you walk by a pond and you may not even realize there's a frog there and they get spooked, they'll make this little beep, you know, kind of sound as they jump in the water. So both males and females will do that, either the alarm call or the release call. But as far as the mating calls, it's just the males that do that. So they advertise and then the female chooses which one she wants to go with. So that's how that works. And this picture on the left here, those are some gray tree frogs, Cope's gray tree frogs, in a position called amplexus. And that's basically their mating position. Normally this is going to happen in the water, because the frogs and toads, they're going to lay their eggs in the water. But sometimes the males, you know, even though they're smaller, they get a little excited, you know, and they want to grab their woman kind of quickly. So they will jump on the larger female's back. And then that poor female has to hobble over to the water with this frog guy on her back. But they will go into the water and the female will release the eggs. The male fertilizes them externally. So outside in the water, the sperm and the eggs will combine. And then they usually do this around vegetation. And you can see like a clump of these little round eggs sometimes in the water. Sometimes they're frog eggs, sometimes they're salamander eggs, or sometimes they're something completely different. But eventually, depending on the species, they will hatch into tadpoles, or I love the old school name for tadpole, the pollywog. That's just a fun word right there. So they will be tadpoles, and they don't look much like an adult frog at that point, do they? So they're more like a fish. They have gills for breathing like fish do. They're eating plant material like algae, so they have like sucking mouth parts. And eventually, though, even though there's these external changes going on, that big word metamorphosis that we maybe learned in second grade with life cycle studies, there's a lot going on internally too. So a tadpole, for example, only has 2 chambers in its heart. But as it becomes a frog, it gets an extra heart chamber. So an adult frog has 3 chambers and a tadpole only has 2. It also trades out those gills for lungs, and that's what allows them to go out onto water. But you can see through this chart, if you kind of go in a clockwise motion here, sort of the progression of that change. So we've got the tail, and then eventually the back legs pop out first, and you still have the tail there. But then slowly the tail will start to be absorbed by the body. And then the front legs will come in. If you've ever seen one of these frogs that has the 4 legs and a tail, it's really kind of funky. It's really fun to find one of those. But eventually that tail will become absorbed and you'll have a young frog and then the adult frog. So that's generally how the life cycle goes. And yes, they're calling so that this whole process can happen. So that begs the question, what sound does a frog make? What sound did we all learn when we were kids, or maybe even as adults we still hear this, that a frog makes this kind of sound? If you can type it in the chat box if you like. Anybody? Croak, ribbit, yes. That's the typical sound. I even have a cat toy that's a frog and it ribbits. So like, all right, so that's kind of crazy. Here's the typical sound. Let me know if you guys can't hear that. All right, so where did that come from? Because none of our 32 species ribbit. So that's kind of like crazy, right? Here's a hint. How did that sound get to be spread so far and wide? Where did the sound ribbit come from? And here's your hint. This is one of the first films that had audio. And think about where it was maybe filmed. Yes, Tarzan. So where do you think Tarzan was filmed? Where were most early movies filmed? It's in the US, Hollywood, yes. So they used whatever was in the area, right? So in Hollywood or California, they have the Pacific tree frog. You see, the Pacific tree frog does not live here, but it does live out there. So when they needed a frog sound, that's what they used. And then as movies were spread worldwide, nationwide, then worldwide, then that sound went with it. And there are some other frogs in the world that ribbit, but none of ours do here in Georgia. So we're going to learn what ours sound like. Since they don't ribbit, what do they do? And we're going to start with a species that's not going to be calling much longer. You might be surprised to learn that we have a certain group of frogs that breed in cooler weather, and then another group that breeds in warmer weather. So we're mostly going to focus on the ones that breed and call in the warmer months. But this one could still be around, and we could have a whole other program on fall and winter breeding frogs. There's fewer of them, and that is one way that you can kind of narrow down your options in your brain on what you might be hearing. For example, American toads, they're going to be calling when it's cold out. So you're not going to be hearing those this time of year. But spring peepers, you could be. And in each of these slides, I'm going to show a picture of the critter. We'll talk a little bit about the physical characteristics. But the reason that biologists like to use sound more so than looking at the frog to identify it is because their physical characteristics can be super variable. They can be different colors. Sometimes their patterns aren't exactly the same, but the sound is going to always be the same, pretty much. not near the variation, and not variation like you might find with learning bird calls. That's, you know, a cardinal, for example, has a gazillion different calls, and as common as that bird is, it can be a little hard to even learn all of those. So the spring peeper, as its name implies, does make some peeping sounds. If you were to find one, it's fairly small. It's a type of tree frog. You can see the little toe discs that it has. And it has a faint kind of X-like pattern on its back. It's not going to be an exact X. It's going to be like this irregular X. But that's one way to identify it by sight. But let's hear what they sound like. It's peeping basically, right? And if you hear a lot of them and they're kind of off in the distance, they can sound a little bit like jingle bells. And so even though we call them spring peepers, they're really more of a winter species here. Further north, it's going to be more of a spring species. So you could have those guys. And I hear these just like driving down the road, you cross over a retention pond, you know, or something, and I can hear these guys out the window. All right, here's one that's really common, a Fowler's toad. And like other toads, it's got that wartier skin. And sometimes they have that line down the middle of their back, sometimes they don't. But I call these like parking lot toads, sidewalk toads. These are the ones you're going to find in suburban and urban areas. They're not real picky about habitat. They're pretty tolerant of pollution. And so this picture here shows a whining child. Maybe she's lost at night. She's by a street lamp and she's lost at night. And that whininess is kind of reminiscent of what the Fowler's toad sounds like. And I'm sure you guys have heard this before. So hang on just a second. Let me get this guy going. Just whiny, kind of nasally and kind of whiny. So these are super, super common. And these will be even more active as we get warmer. The next one is the northern cricket frog. And by the way, we're not going to do all 32 species here. We're only going to do like 10 or 12. And these are ones that are going to be pretty commonly found. But the northern cricket frog, we mentioned earlier, it's pretty small. Some people do say that it sounds a little like a cricket. A lot of times they'll have kind of an upside down triangle in between their eyes. You can see that in this picture here. And but there again, they can be super variable. They can be different colors. That triangle may not be as evident in some cricket frogs as it is others. But they sound like you're tapping marbles together. And I should have mentioned before, but most of these sounds are you're going to hear at night. Frogs are mostly active at night, but cricket frogs in particular, if you've got, say you're out at a pond and there's a lot of grassy vegetation around the pond and the storm clouds are building, it's kind of like they can sense that humidity and that a storm's coming and like they're getting ready to party. So it could be the middle of the day and you'll hear these guys. And you probably didn't know that they were frogs. You probably thought they were crickets. So let's play that. My phone keeps trying to go to sleep. Oops, wrong one. Let's see. Let me find the cricket frog. iPhone malfunction here. Hang on just a minute. Okay, northern cricket frog. Here we go. Just a bunch of marbles tapping together. There is a southern cricket frog, as you've guessed, it lives in South Georgia. They also sound like marbles tapping together, but they're more rhythmic. It's more like tap, 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 whereas these are kind of more random taps. Super common, and they are very well camouflaged. This picture has some contrast, but you can hear this, and it can be so loud, even though it's a little frog the size of your thumbnail. But trying to find one of these, even when you're hovering over it, is really challenging. So that's kind of cool. I challenge you to find one. The only time I've ever really seen a view of one was out in the middle of a trail after a rain. So they're going to go further away from water possibly after a rain or during a rain. All right, American bullfrog. Super large frog. This is going to be the largest frog in the state. The smallest one is called a little grass frog, and it's about 3/4 of an inch. These guys can be 8-9 inches and at least like 2 pounds, maybe sometimes bigger. But they have a very deep bellowing voice, which reminds me of James Earl Jones. And he was the voice of Mufasa in The Lion King. And then at a recent program I did for Hall County Spring Expo, I did the same program, and someone said they thought it sounded like a lightsaber going vroom, vroom. And it just so happens that James Earl Jones was also Darth Vader in Star Wars. So let's see what you guys think. You guys hear that okay? Hopefully you heard that. Seemed like my phone wasn't as loud that time, but hopefully you heard it. Some people say it sounds like jugarom, but there again, it's this deep, bellowy kind of sound. And yes, some Star Wars battle, yes, the lightsabers going back and forth and that noise that they make when they swing them. So that's the American bullfrog. Really nothing that you can confuse that for. And then as far as looking at the frog, yes, it's large. It does have, for a frog anyway, for a true frog, some slight warty skin. And look behind the eye. That's called the tympanum. That's basically their eardrum. It's really large in this picture. And in true frogs, which a bullfrog is, you can compare the size of the eardrum to the eye to tell if it's a male or female. So if it's really large, the tympanum is really large, bigger than the eye, then it's a male. If it's the same size or smaller, then it's a female. But that only applies to that group of true frogs, not to, say, tree frogs or cricket frogs. But they're super common. In fact, they're actually invasive in other parts of the U.S. where they don't have their native range, maybe even other parts of the world. This is a one that some people will use for food. This frog, and then there's another one in South Georgia that's pretty big called the pig frog. And it kind of grunts like a pig. But anyway, this picture was taken in the Atlanta Botanical Garden. They have a conservatory there, and they have that like man-made pond in the front of the conservatory, and that's where this guy was. So if you want to get good looks and sound, listening to bullfrogs, that's a good place to go. All right, so another true frog is the green frog. Some people call it the bronze frog because the color can be variable. Sometimes they can look a little more brownish. And so this tympanum, I'm looking at this one, it's probably, I don't know, that's close call. That could be a female, but it does look ever so slightly bigger than the eye. It's hard to tell. But if it's calling, then we know it's a male, right? If it's doing the typical call. So this one sounds like a banjo pluck. And oftentimes you'll only hear one of these. Like you'll just go by a pond and you'll hear the boonk, and that may be all you get. You're not necessarily going to hear a whole chorus of them. Sometimes I don't know, to me they seem like they're a little out on their own. They're a little more lonely of a frog. So let's see what that sounds like. I'm actually going to turn on an external speaker to see if you can hear that any better. Is that better? Bloom, 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 bloom. Yeah, it does sound a little bit like an American bittern. So it's just like a little banjo pluck. So just think of a frog playing a banjo. Whatever kind of weird visuals you get when you're thinking of these frogs and hearing them, that whatever sticks for you. Maybe some of the things that I'm likening them to don't register with you as well as something else. So for Tasha, you know, American bittern, it's the American bittern frog. Then you have to remember which one it is, the green frog.
Hey,
Okay.
Linda,
Yeah.
Jen here. So somebody had a question that I believe they're referencing the green bronze frog. And they ask, if this frog jumps on you, will it cause skin issues?
Not necessarily. I will get into this a little more later, but um, I would say not so much this frog, but there are some toads that could potentially cause some skin irritation. So hang on to that thought. We do have a slide in just a little bit about that. So basic frog safety. The chances of one of these jumping on you are that's pretty slim. They really don't want anything to do with us. There's a few exceptions. There are a couple tree frogs that oddly seem friendly. But no, I don't think you'll have to worry about that with this one. But good question. Well, I'll definitely address that. Okay, so not to be confused with the green frog is the green tree frog. And this one, I mean, it can vary in color, but man, when it's feeling happy and warm, it's this beautiful chartreuse green. They have that white stripe that extends from their lip pretty much all the way down their back. This one's sitting on an iris leaf outside of Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center's visitor center. That's where I got this picture. And to me, it has a little bit of a duck-like quality, hence the duck graphic in the bottom left. And it just sounds like a happy frog. It's kind of bouncy. And when I hear it, I almost like without thinking about it, just start doing like a little dance, a little jig. So let's see what you guys think. And yes, you will find these on porches. I see somebody mentioned that in the chat. And they're pretty tolerant around people. You know, they're commonly found in neighborhoods. These are the ones I see sometimes stuck to the glass, especially near a porch light, because that's a grocery store for them. They've got the bugs coming in, and then all they have to do is sit there and eat them. So that's pretty smart, right? But you can find them out and about too. They do seem to like sunny areas a lot, especially like around ponds. If it's got a lot of cover, you're less likely to find them there as much as maybe an open sunny area around a pond. But yes, that is the happy frog. All right, it's real similar but different, at least in appearance, is the squirrel tree frog. And you see this one has a little bit of a white line, but it's not as prominent as the green tree frog. It doesn't necessarily extend all the way down the side. And these guys don't get to be quite as big as a green tree frog. But if it's young, you're not necessarily going to be able to tell the difference. But if you hear it, you will. So they sound a little bit like a squirrel chattering. I'm sure we've all had gray squirrels around us before and heard their chatter before. So let's see what you guys think. And it will just keep doing that over and over and over and over. It does sound a little pig-like, yeah. But it's just kind of like I don't do very good imitations, as you can see. That's why we have audio here. But these are super, super common, probably more common than the others that we've looked at so far. And this picture I took of squirrel tree frog in my bird bath. So, you know, you don't have to go far to find these guys. All right, here's one of my favorite. This one's really, really common too. I dare say it's at least as common as the squirrel tree frog, and it's called the Cope's gray tree frog. This one has a little bit wartier skin than some other tree frogs, so you might find it further away from water than some of the others. It does still, you know, they still need to stay moist though. If they dry out, then, you know, if you've ever found a dried out frog in a public bathroom or something, then you know they have to have water to survive. These guys have a white spot under their eye, but there is another one we're going to talk about that has that same white spot. And then if you look at the crease where their thigh meets their body, it's kind of that yellowish wash. And there's actually a purpose to that. So this frog can be really well camouflaged, especially on a tree trunk with like lichens and everything. They can be variable. Sometimes they're more gray, sometimes they're more greenish, sometimes they're more brown. But say they're sitting there and a predator comes around and they want to spook the predator. They will jump up and the predator will get this flash of yellow that it didn't see before and be like, whoa, what was that? Kind of like distracted. And then it's looking for the flash of yellow. But meanwhile, the gray tree frog has landed and covered that up again. So it's hiding again. So that's pretty cool, I think. But as this picture in the lower left implies, they sound like they're belching. It's basically like a trilly belch, and it can be incredibly loud. So let's see. I used to have these outside my window. I lived in Covington for a long time, and we had a water feature out there. And my nieces would come stay with me and come to camp at Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center when I worked there years ago. And they'd be like, Aunt Linda, we can't sleep. These tree frogs are driving us nuts. So you either love the sound when you're trying to sleep or you can't stand it. But here's the trilly belch. Oh, and the picture in the bottom right, you're like, what's up with that? In the middle of these trilly belches, it sounds like they're going whoop, whoop, whoop. You have to listen for it kind of closely. It's like they're having a party and they just all of a sudden go whoop, whoop, whoop. So listen out for that. Oh, hang on. I got to get my phone to cooperate again. Okay, here we go. There's a trilly belch. You get the idea. So if you're thinking your neighbor's had maybe one too many beers or something, and then he's having a party, it may not be that. It may be a Cope's gray tree frog. So yeah, these guys are super fun. All right, we're getting towards the end here. Okay, here's the other frog that has that white spot underneath it, but it does not have the yellow wash on the inside of the thigh. So you would, of course, have to have this in hand or see it jumping around to know that, unless you hear it. And this is the frog that got me curious about frogs to begin with. I was learning my nocturnal bird calls years and years ago, and I heard what I thought was a bird up in the tree at night, and I did not recognize it. It was not a whippoorwill. It was not a chuck-will's widow. It was not a nighthawk. It was not an owl. So I was like, what is that? And then here we are today. But the bird voice tree frog, it sounds like it's whistling. And it's kind of a monotone whistle, kind of like if you were going to whistle for your dog to come to you. So here we go. Green boy. So these are not going to be near as common as like the Cope's gray. And so if you hear one of these, you're probably going to be in a little more pristine habitat. They're, more of a rural frog, but you could have them in a neighborhood still, especially if the habitat's good. So that's the bird voice tree frog. My spark frog, yes. People talk about having spark birds. Like, what bird was it that really just got you into birding? Oh, here's my spark frog. That's right, the bird voice tree frog. All right, here's another fun one. So we talked about the bird voice tree frog sound like you're calling your dog. This one sounds like a pack of hound dogs. This is the barking tree frog. They are very large, very charismatic tree frogs. Sometimes they're solid green. You can see the variations in this slide here of the different colors. Sometimes they have spots, sometimes they don't. But they sound like a pack of hound dogs. So that's the barking tree frog. If you ever want to hear these frogs, then you can go out, somewhere more remote, preferably that has different ponds. And I'm thinking of Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center in Mansfield. It's not super close to Milton. It's probably an hour and a half away, but they have 22 ponds there. Some are left without fish for frog management. So those frogs that are real sensitive to their eggs or their tadpoles getting gobbled up, that gives them a place to be. And it's in one of those ponds that I found these barking tree frogs. So, all right. Now we're getting into a few weirdo ones. We're nearing the end of our audio fun. So the eastern narrowmouth toad. For perspective, this thing is sitting on a muscadine leaf, so wild grape leaf. It's pretty small. It's another one of those little jobbers, like that's full grown. But you would not know it because they have the loudest, most piercing, nasally sound, hence this picture of the woman with the clothespin on her nose. It's unreal. And they look a little funky, right? If you look closely behind their eyes, there's like this extra fold of skin, sort of like on the top of their head. They will actually use that to protect their eyes. That skin will go over their eyes when they are eating ants to protect their eyes from the ants. So that's kind of funky, right? But I don't know why. Whenever I hear these guys, it sounds to me like someone saying, "Say cheese," and it's just like this really piercing, nasally cheese. Let's see what you guys think. Woo, that's loud. And it really is loud. I didn't increase the volume on that one. That's just what it sounds like. Cheese. I don't know why I have like this picture in my head of three frogs, like the three amigos with sombreros on, saying cheese. So that's my weird mind for you. Y'all can come up with your own visuals if you like. Okay, Motor Speedway during Indy 500. That's a good one. That's a good way to remember it. Okay, so getting to last but not least, but one that is a really fun one to share, and the kids especially love this. This is the eastern spadefoot toad. Super cryptic looking, has a vertical pupil. That's kind of funky, right? And they can be light color, dark color. This one just happens to be dark. You see the sandy soil underneath it. So they do live statewide, but they're more numerous along the coast. And they mostly live underground, so it's only during really torrential downpours that they come out to breed. And they do have a funky toe, which unfortunately this picture doesn't show it really well, but they have a toe that kind of sticks out funny, and they use that for digging their little burrows. There again, they can't dig those burrows as well up here in the Piedmont where our soil is hard and clay-like. And yes, it does look a little like the toothless cousin from How to Train a Dragon. That's very good. You're right. It totally does. This one, as the picture in the bottom left hints at, sounds like it's vomiting. So that's a fun sound, right? But it's just like brrr, and you'll hear it now. That's pretty ridiculous, huh? But I mean, hey, you won't forget it, right? And so you're not going to see these a lot, but if you happen to be outside, especially along the coast, and you have a torrential downpour, then keep an ear out and eyes out for eastern spadefoot toads. And I had never seen one of these for the longest time. I had learned their calls, I'd learned, how to identify them by sight, but I'd never actually experienced them until I went to a wedding. My cousin got married on Hilton Head Island years ago, and it was the reception was outdoors, but it happened to rain really hard. Fortunately, they had a tent and they had the outdoor dance floor set up and all that. And I happened to see a woman's stiletto almost pierce a poor little spadefoot toad that found itself in the middle of the dance floor. And so in my garb, I had to get up and save the spadefoot toad. And I'm not big into wedding dances. I don't do the chicken dance and all that. It's not my thing. But by golly, this little toad perked me up when I found him. I was super excited to find him. And I'm sure he was very happy to not be impaled by a woman's stiletto. So that's my fun spadefoot toad story. And I did not kiss him for various reasons. I already have a prince. I'll be married 30 years coming up on May 20th, which is really hard to believe because I'm still 29, right? But there's other reasons why you wouldn't want to do that too. And that kind of relates back to the be careful handling frogs thing. So we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to quiz you guys. And you know, this could be just total entertainment. You don't have to necessarily have taken notes for this. But we'll see if you actually identify any of these sounds. So you're sitting by a pond at sunset in the spring. Let's see what you hear. There's 2 species in this audio clip. So let's see. All right, if you have any idea, nope, it's not the bronze frog, that's the banjo one. Nope, narrow mouth is real nasally. It's one you like. Nope. Bullfrogs and spring peepers, nope. The dancing one, yes, the dancing one is the primary species in this clip. Does anyone remember which one that is? It's kind of bouncy. It's the happy frog. The green tree frog, yes, ding, 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 green tree frog. And then a little bit harder to hear towards the end of that clip was the bird voice tree frog. So don't feel bad if you didn't get it right. This took a long time for me to learn. And I had a biologist, our state herpetologist at the time was teaching me, and then I hosted a Froggin By Ear program for the public at Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center when I worked there for many years in a row. So I've got a lot of time into learning these. And I basically found recordings. We have a CD, believe it or not that anyone uses CDs anymore. But I put that into my iTunes library and I put it on shuffle. And I'm just driving down the road, listening to my tunes, or I'm sitting in my office at work, or I'm, cleaning the house or whatever. And, go from some popular song to, and it's like playing Think Fast with myself. And if I, could guess it, great. If I needed to double check myself, I just looked down at, it was my iPod at the time, now it'd be an iPhone, and see what track that is. So it's a little bit like learning a foreign language, but it's not near as difficult as learning birds, as we mentioned before. And I'm going to email you guys a cheat sheet that I developed. So if you've not taken notes and you want to, and refer back to it, like which is the happy frog, which is the one that sounds duck-like, or in the winter there's one called an upland chorus frog. It sounds like you're dragging your thumbnail across the teeth of a comb. So it's got all those little points in it. So there are ways for you to hear them. Otherwise, we're going to talk about the CD here and some online resources that you can refer to. But before we do, since you now love frogs even more than when you first started this webinar, hopefully, how can we help them? So if you don't already have habitat for them, then you can create it. Or if you do have habitat, you can make sure that it stays healthy and clean. That could be a backyard pond that you create, or it could be a plant saucer. It doesn't have to be fancy at all. Or if you have a down log in your yard, that's a perfect place for frogs to stay moist during the day, especially as it gets really hot. That's coming our way before we know it. We've had a relatively cool spring so far, but as we all know, that's getting ready to change. If you have a larger pond, say you have some property, then it's really good if you can keep a buffer of vegetation around the pond, because that's perfect habitat for the frogs. And I know that makes access to the water a little harder. Maybe you have some areas that you mow down to the water, but a lot of it you keep vegetated. And if you have issues with geese, like they do at golf courses, because they mow that vegetation all the way down to the water, you won't have as many issues with that if you leave this buffer of vegetation there. So the geese like it wide open and clean. They're going to come out of the water in a, real easy fashion, but they're not necessarily going to do that when you've got this vegetative buffer around there. And people have issues with goose poop. It's unsightly. I had one guy years ago complain that his sod was getting invaded by weeds because of the goose poop, and what was I going to do about it? So here's your answer. Just, let your lawn grow up and plant some native warm season grasses, and then you won't have as much trouble with goose poop. But yes, the frogs definitely like this, especially those cricket frogs we mentioned earlier. And then if you're concerned about mosquitoes, because you've got water around, standing water, if it's a pond situation, if you just leave it be, I promise you the frogs will take care of it, and the other critters that eat all those aquatic larval insects. So they will balance things out if you have the patience to wait on that, for that balance to happen. Nature will do that all on its own without our input. But if you can't wait, you're getting eaten alive, then if it's something that you, a pot, or we mentioned the plant saucer that you can just dump every couple of days, that will prevent those mosquito larvae from hatching. And if it's a larger body of water, you can put these little mosquito fish in. They're native. They're like a wild guppy, and they will eat the mosquito larvae. Other options, maybe you have a body of water that you can't dump, but it's, smaller, maybe not as big as a, like huge pond. You can put these mosquito dunks that you can find at any hardware store, big box store, and they actually prevent the mosquito larvae from hatching. And it's a bacteria. It's a natural bacteria. It's not going to be harmful to other critters. It will prevent other insects from hatching, though, like crane flies, for example. So it's not completely without fault, but it's about the safest thing for mosquito prevention that, aside from just dumping the water, that you can find. And you don't necessarily need to use a whole dunk. If you've got a pretty small container of water, you can just take a little piece off, and that'll last about a month. So there are solutions to dealing with the mosquitoes. You definitely don't want to be broadcasting herbicides or pesticides, rather, even though some of these companies will advertise that it targets only mosquitoes. That simply isn't true. Hate to say that, but it's not. It's false advertising. It will definitely affect other insects, other beneficial insects like pollinators in your yard. So you don't want to be inviting these creatures just to kill them, right? That's not good. That's not cool. All right, let's see. Okay, what else can we do to help frogs? If you have a pool, then you can get one of these fun little devices, because frogs will go in the pool, and chlorine's not great for them, obviously, but the sooner you can get them out, the better. And not all frogs have those little discs on their toes like the tree frogs do. So they can't just hop out of the water with nothing to push up against. So this actual product is called a frog log, and there might be something else on the market now, but that will help them get up and out of the water as soon as possible. And then because frogs breathe through their skin, if we have any chemicals around our homes, certainly pesticides are problematic, but even just cleaning chemicals, you're washing your car and now that stuff's going down the driveway and into Lord knows where, the neighborhood creek, that can be problematic for frogs too. So just reducing the amount of those, or eliminating if you can, those products would be really helpful. Okay, so here we go. We mentioned earlier that we're going to talk about using caution handling frogs. I first want to address a myth that's out there. I've already given you the hint, but true or false, you can get warts from handling a toad. Anybody ever hear that? Y'all can type in the chat if you like. Yeah, we've all heard that, right? But it's simply not true. Warts come from a virus. You're not going to get warts from handling a toad. But there are some other things to be cautious of. You've got a little girl trying to kiss this frog. Is that a good idea? Yes or no? No, I don't know that the frog is real happy. It's kind of hard to tell. He's got one of those resting faces that's just kind of like, I don't know what's going on here. But amphibians and even other creatures can be carriers of salmonella. So not a good idea to be putting our lips on there. And if you happen to be handling them, you want to be sure to not put your hands near your eyes or your mouth, or no way to like ingest that, because they can have some bacteria and some funk on them. And then toads in particular, like this cane toad, they have these, they're actually poison glands that are behind their eyes. And in our native toads, they're much smaller than they are in the cane toad. That's a really big, it's called a parotid gland. And those will secrete a milky toxin. They call it a bufotoxin. So in our native toads, it's not so dangerous. It's still something you wouldn't want to ingest. If your dog or your cat happen to bite one of these toads and pierce that parotid gland, that's going to cause really major foaming in their mouth. They could get stomach upset. They're probably not going to die from it, but you definitely want to wash their mouth out and, just keep an eye on them, obviously. But something like this cane toad, they get really huge. Those parotid glands are really huge. They can be lethal. Now, we've only had a few occurrences of these in the state, which is one too many in my book. But it is another one of those non-native species that pops up here. Somebody had something to do with it. They're not expanding their population. They're just like the random finding of one. So people do strange things, y'all. Like people are stranger than wildlife most of the time. So anyway, I don't think you'll have to worry about the cane toad so much, but just be aware that, of any toad, to keep your pets away for their safety. And so we obviously want to be safe ourselves, but we want to remember that frogs have permeable skin too. We don't want to hurt the frogs. So even if you think you have perfectly clean hands, unless you've just washed them, you probably have some natural oils or salts, or especially if you have like bug spray or suntan lotion or something like that, or even perfume, deodorants, whatever, lotions on your hands, then that's going to be absorbed by that frog skin, and that's not going to be good for them at all. So if you had to handle a frog for some reason, if you can get gloves on, great. If not, at least, by the very least, make sure your hands are wet, which is going to make it harder to hold them, right? So ideally, you're not holding them at all. You're just kind of observing them. And you can see from all these pictures, most of these pictures I've taken myself, they're very good subjects. They will pose for you. You have to not be making sudden movements and all that, but you can get a good up close look at them without having to touch them. So this is a really young green tree frog that was outside work one night when I was working late. So he was super cute. I had to get his picture. Okay, so you've got all this fun knowledge. You're going to get your cheat sheet emailed to you. And then once you feel confident that you can identify your frogs, certainly by sound at least, then you can record your frog findings for science. There's several, some people call them citizen science or community science or participatory science. Basically, these crowdsourcing programs, you get lots of data from the general public. You don't have to be a biologist to participate. And there's a couple ways you can record your findings. So iNaturalist is one program. There's an app, a couple apps. There's just a regular iNaturalist app, or there's one called Seek. And you just take a picture of the frog, and if you know what it is, great. If you don't, then that's fine too. That picture will go to experts that will help you identify it. And then you've got a record of that frog in that area that our state herpetologist was not able to get. Also, if you've ever heard of the Georgia Adopt a Stream program, it's a water quality program that volunteers do. They also have a frog monitoring portion of that. And then if you live around Atlanta, there's the Amphibian Foundation's Metro Atlanta Amphibian Monitoring Project, or MAP. And basically you're going to do the same thing. You're going to record your findings. And that's right now it's limited to Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, and Gwinnett, but they are in communications actually with the AdoptaStream folks and may try and expand that. Okay, someone said there's a Frog Watch USA chapter in Forsyth County. That's great. And so, yeah, that's another one you can look up. We don't have them that I know of down my way, but I live in Griffin. But that's nice to hear that there is one there. So because, as we mentioned before, frogs are pretty important. They play important roles in the environment, and they're good bioindicators. Having some more eyes on the scene, eyes and ears, that will help biologists to know, get a better picture of what's going on, not just with the frogs, but with the environment as well. And heck, it's just fun. I mean, if you're out there listening to this stuff anyway, you know, why not? Why not record it? All right. So how do you keep practicing? I mentioned a frog CD. This says new. It's not new. It's really old now. DNR made a ton of these decades ago, back when CDs were a thing. I guess iPods existed, but the iPhone didn't, maybe, if that gives you any indication how long ago this was. So, and we actually sold them on our website. Now we have hordes of them because no one or very few people have CD players anymore. And you can actually get a free copy. So if you don't have a CD player, you can even get like just an external drive that'll hook up to your computer of a CD player. And then you can download it into your music playlist. But if you want one, you can request one by sending an email to info.cewc@dnr.ga.gov. And so that goes to Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center. They are the keeper of the hordes of frog CDs. And they will mail one to you for free. So that's one way to get it. If you don't want to fool with a CD, you don't have an old truck like I do with a CD player still, then there's a couple online resources you can go to. The Savannah River Ecology Lab is one of them. And they basically have frog species profiles. Not all of them have audio, but most of them do. So you can click on the little sound icon to get the audio. And then the U.S. Geologic Survey, they have a frog call quiz. So you can not only learn your calls, but you can actually quiz yourself on that. And that's where I went 2 years ago. I actually used this other than just like for quirky fun. I monitored frogs. I had a frog monitoring route for the state of Georgia for DNR. And I went out in the middle of the night, remote places, and had 10 GPS points per route to stop at. And I would get out, turn the truck off, and listen for 5 minutes and record what I hear, and kind of like an abundance rating too. And then there were other data that we collected, like, is the moon out? How many cars are going by? Just all kind of crazy stuff. What's the temperature, of course? And you know, is it windy? So all of those things I recorded. Unfortunately, that program the funding got cut, so it is no more. But I'm still left with this really fun knowledge that I get to share with you guys. So I can send out a PDF of this PowerPoint along with that frog call cheat sheet that I mentioned. So if you're not taking notes here, then don't worry about it. So that's all I've got for tonight. I really appreciate your attention. I hope this was fun and educational at the same time, and quirky. And you've got some fun things to discuss at your next family dinner. Like, hey, did you know an eastern spadefoot toad sounds like it's vomiting? You know, like that'd be a great time to bring that up, right? And I wanted to mention real quickly, if you wanted to support our program, then you can buy a wildlife license plate. So we have the one here that's got a monarch butterfly on Georgia aster. That one goes to the wildlife conservation section to fund our work for frogs and other non-game wildlife. Or there is the bald eagle tag. And these are $25 extra per year, and we get 80% of that to our program. So there's obviously some manufacturing costs and some operational costs, but we get a big chunk of that because the wildlife conservation section, formerly known as the non-game section of DNR, is not funded like a lot of other sections of DNR. So we don't get state tax dollars. We work mostly off of federal funding, which is a little iffy now, as we know, we've all heard in the news. And the most of our funding comes from the sale of these license plates. So that's what our biologists use to do their work. So any support for that would be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions beyond this program, then feel free to reach out to me. I've even had people send me audio that they've taken, in the dark on their phones. And so I kind of love those challenges. This helps sharpen my brain a little bit. And I have been stumped before, so that's always a possibility. There's the caveat there. But anyway, I've really enjoyed this time with you all. I hope you all have a great evening, and I hope you enjoy your spring and summer evenings a little more with the knowledge that you've learned tonight.
Wow, Linda May. I was taking a book worth of notes, and I think we'll all be grateful to have this PowerPoint. And I posted in the chat for those of you that would like the information. A few people reached out to me saying, hey, we want to tune into future ones, so you can find them on miltonga.gov/wildlife 101. So this will be posted there. Hopefully you'll be able to send that on to folks and get them just as excited as you are about frogs, and tune in next month for our talk on bears. And I think we're all a little curious about bears, teddy bears, and wild bears. Hopefully you treat the two differently. But yeah, so Linda, thank you so much. And I'm really excited about owls. That's my spark bird for sure. Wow. And I'm really appreciative of it. And hopefully you'll have maybe some video footage. Maybe I'm queuing you up.
I do have some video footage. I've got lots of footage. This nest box is right outside my kitchen window, so I don't even have to disturb them to get the footage. And the young stay with the adults for like 4 months. It's not like, a couple of weeks and they get, okay, you're on your own. So yeah, I get to enjoy them year round. It's really fun.
Well, just know, Linda, there were tons of people that reached out to me during the chat saying, hey, sorry, I couldn't make it. And they're really looking forward to this video. So any of the resources that you have that you want to share forward, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you have one last chance to ask Linda any questions that you might have about frogs, if you have questions about birds, you can reach out to Linda. And otherwise, you have to wait all the way to November.
No, you don't. I love getting random questions. Like I say, I've been doing this 30 years, but I still have so much to learn. It's one of those fields, like the more you learn, the more humbling it is, the more you realize you have to learn. So it really is, it's enjoyable to receive questions.
That's awesome.
I love the network of ways that those of us that work in conservation or education, we get to link up, and our nerdy brains, our wildlife nerdy brains, get to be tested all the time. I really appreciate that. So somebody said, you're the best and most fun teacher. And I will say that's a pretty high honor. So Susie, of all the teachers of the teacher world, big kudos to Linda. So thank you very much for your time, and everybody, we look forward to seeing you next month about Appalachia bears.
Yay. All right, y'all have a good evening. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Linda.